Everyone, we'll just give everyone a couple of seconds just to pull through from the waiting room before we begin. And just conscious of the time, so we will make a start, and just anyone who's latecomers can come in and catch up as they come. So hello everyone, welcome to the second episode of the How To Academy, small business masterclasses with the Great British Entrepreneur Awards and Salesforce. These masterclasses are free and designed to offer actionable steps that can take within your business to improve, whether that's your processes, your plans, your outcomes. And today we're joined by Strategic Insight Director of Kantar, Sarah Reed, and she'll be sharing some insight into how to conduct market research for a small business. Now, I don't want to step on her toes too much in terms of the content, but Sarah's going to be covering the most effective market research strategies, whether you're launching a product or a service, and key tactics that are going to give you a competitive edge, even if you're on a tight budget. There is an opportunity to ask questions during this session. If you have a question that you'd like to ask Sarah, leave it in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to put it to Sarah at the end of the session. Like I said, I don't want to step on Sarah's toes too much in terms of the content. So with that, I will pass over to you, Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to spend this next hour with you. In the next sort of 30 minutes or so, I've got some slides that I wanted to walk you through. You'll get a couple of models, and when I get to those slides, I'll flag to say that actually you can use these with any insight. I'll also share some case studies. I have chosen a big brand case study, so it's a brand that we would all know, but for me, it just helps build the story. And hopefully helps illuminate some of the examples. So without further ado, I'm going to, now someone's going to say, you can see my screen. I'm hoping that's the case now. So the first piece of advice that I would give anyone when they're thinking about how to build their brand is knowing where you're headed. And it might seem really obvious, but having worked with small businesses, entrepreneurs and startups, sometimes you can get a little bit lost in the detail of everything else that you have to consider. So my first piece of advice is know where you're headed, whether it's sourcing suppliers, whether it's thinking about getting your brand listed, whether it's thinking about your marketing campaign. And then what I'm hoping to give you as we go through the session is not worrying about how you're going to get there, but having a bit of a strategy on how you're going to get there. And why is that important? Why bother doing research at all? Well, one of the reasons is that we all live and breathe our brand. We could recite it intimately. We can talk very knowledgeably about it. But what we want is to get inside the mind of the consumer. And I know it's a bit cheesy, but I quite like this cartoon where you're trying to really be that tiny little dot inside the consumer's mind that makes them think about your brand over any other that's in the category. So what we're trying to do really is get inside their heads and change their behavior. And I'll start to build how I feel is a good way to do that. So for the rest of the time, I'm going to talk about what insight sources are available to you, the difference between some of the sources, because that can sometimes be a little confusing if you've not come from the FMCG world, which a lot of entrepreneurs haven't. I'm hopefully just going to decode some of it for you. My specific experience in market research is within Kantar, and it's within Kantar Royal Panel. So I will dwell on panels and how they can be useful. And then the main body of the presentation is about a brand growth structure that we've pulled together at Kantar, which I think will be helpful to any business or service. So I'm going to navigate you on the journey. So this is me. I have worked for a number of FMCG companies, so I kind of sometimes say that I've sat on your side of the desk, I've sat in front of retailers and tried to get products listed in various roles in category marketing, business and product development. I started life in market research. I worked for IRI for a number of years. So I've seen what the EPOS suppliers can do, and I've probably got a bit of a perspective on how they can work with Kantar. The majority of my role at Kantar is working with SMEs, but also their investors and brand owners like yourself. And really what we're doing is trying to create strong listing arguments and brand growth strategies. So hopefully I'm qualified to talk you through. So for those not familiar with Kantar World Panel, ours is a continuous panel. So we've got 30,000 households who every time they go shopping, they scan their shopping in. We speak to some of them about their consumption habits. We also have a small panel of people who tell us what they're doing when they go out of home. We've got a lifestyle panel, and we've also got a panel in Ireland. We cover the majority of the FMCG markets, all the grocery sectors, lifestyle sectors, and there's some stats there about how many occasions and purchases that we secure. We also have, for those that aren't in traditional FMCG, we've got an app-based, an app-powered panel called World Panel Plus, which I haven't spent too much time pulling information together on for this presentation, but that takes us into the realm of all shopping, so DIY, toys. So if that's something you're interested in, reach out to me. Before I go any further, I'm really happy for this to be a continuous conversation. Chloe from Greater British Entrepreneur Awards is going to share with you my LinkedIn profile. Following Kantar World Panel is a good start, as well as lots of free to air insight on there. And I'm really happy to have questions or if you want to pick my brains by linking in with me. So I'm just going to give you a bit of context about why the panel data that we have access to at Kantar World Panel and how it fits in with both EPOS and other forms of data. So EPOS will give you fantastic market performance. It's invaluable when you've launched and you want to track your distribution. It can help you give rate of sale, which really gives the retailers confidence that you know what you're talking about. And you can look at named account data. With the panel, because it's our panelist data, we can push the depth of insight a little bit further. So we've got private label transparency. We cover all the retailers, including the discounters, who buys, loyalty, shopper group, switching, all the types of things that you're going to need to know about your brand at some point on their journey. You may also be aware that EMEA, Nectar, Tesco Clubcard, you can get chunks of that data as well, and that gives you brilliant performance information about that specific retailer. It tells you about who buys. It can also give you loyalty. So you can see that what you might need to have as you build your brand and service on its journey, that you may need to have some EPOS, some panel, maybe some loyalty data. I've focused specifically on the retail and category side of data. There's obviously a whole world of market research, which is looking at brand equity and attitudes and usage and behavior. And I'm probably not the best person to advise on that, but the framework I'm going to show you later on may give you some pointers as to what you feel you might need to plug that gap, if that's something you want to understand. Other fantastic sources that we, even at Kantar, use, if you don't already have a grocer subscription or access to the grocer, I advise you to get one straight away. Their focus on pamphlets that they supply every now and then are absolute gold mines for nice category stats and growth stats. And often you'll have some opinion pieces written by some of my colleagues, but also some other retail commentators. And that can just be the start of you scoping out what your selling story is. LinkedIn, so I know I plugged the Kantar World Panel page on LinkedIn. That really does have a lot of free to air information. Anytime we do a webinar, we'll often put slides up there. The IGDs is also a really nice source. And I've just peppered it with a couple of others. I'm getting a lot out of following Mary Portas, and she's talking about how we re-establish retail and how we re-establish our economy post the pandemic. So there's also some really nice thinking in there about what brands need to resonate and how brands need to resonate. Mintel, because of its global coverage, is also fantastic. If you just want a landscape understanding of a category. The Financial Times also run webinars and seminars for small businesses or specific retail areas. And so I've also find that as a good source. I would start to think about that journey. Where do you want your brand to go? Where do you want your product to go? What is destination success? And be aware or be wary of finding a quick fix to your insight gap. Exhaust what's free to air before you start to think about, do I need to invest in order to push my brand further? Think about who your audience is. What sample size do you think is going to help you? And also utility. And by utility, I mean, if you're buying data or subscribing to receive regular data, how are you going to use that? Is that going to have more than one use? Is it going to get you past your Sainsbury's deck, into your Tesco deck, into your Waitrose deck, into your Ricardo deck? Because sometimes the cheapest option isn't always the best. And think about your budget and what your end goal is. And I would say be resourceful. Well, I'm probably preaching to the converted. If you're a brand founder, you've already discovered how to be resourceful. Hopefully this is just a bit of a pointer as to where you can get good information. So really starting with the end in mind, and this is the same for any insight, and it's a really strong platform from which to build any of your communication stories or your retail selling stories. What is the behavior that you're looking to create? Is it more buyers for your brand? Is it more trips for your category? Therefore, what is the strategy that you're going to employ? Do you need to play into more needs, more moments? Do you need to create a larger repertoire for your consumers? And therefore, what are the tactics that you need to use in order to make that happen? Is that about different communication strategy? Is it about changing up your promotions? Or is it actually product innovation that you need to bring in? So this would be my skeleton for any thought about insight. And just building on that further still, in this model, you're welcome to have, you're really focusing on one of these objectives. Is your activity going to generate category growth? Retailers love hearing about category growth. Is it going to help the retailer grow in that category? Again, retailers love hearing about retailer growth. Or is it about growing your brand? And if your brand perhaps has a higher than average price in the category, then you're going to grow the category. So that's why these three objectives are really intertwined. So just building that story a little bit further, how can you grow your brand? Or why is your brand losing shoppers? How's your innovation doing? What is good innovation? Then for the retailers, it's how can you get your brand listed? How do you help that retailer grow in the category where you are present? How's the category performing? How do you grow your category? How can your brand grow the category? And how incremental is my innovation? So hopefully you can see these three things are intertwined. And building your strategy around brand growth, retailer growth, and strategy growth will help you develop further. Measures of success. So I guess the first slide that I showed you was about the journey and then thinking about how you're going to get there. One area where, and big companies do it as well as small companies, is not really thinking about how they're going to measure the success when they get there. So the journey seems endless because you haven't put milestones in, or even measurements in. So for brand growth, very simply put, brand growth, it's more shoppers. For retailer growth, it's about creating more trips, it's about creating frequency. And for category growth, it's thinking about more occasions. So I won't go through all of this, but this for me is quite a nice checklist for when you're thinking about what you need to embark on. So you've decided what your journey's end is, and say it's brand growth. Well, there's four ways that you can generate brand growth. It's about more needs, more moments, more categories, more presence. You will know how far your brand is along any of those journeys. And it's about deciding which one of these levers you are most able to pull in order to generate brand growth. And you can see the other levers for category growth, retailer growth for you, and retailer growth for them. So this is quite a nice checklist. And putting that into the framework, I'm just going to walk you through some examples. And I think I said at the beginning of the meeting that I've picked a hair care example. I've pulled us away from categories that we might be intimately connected to, just so that we've got a little bit of objectivity about why we feel these products earn their rights. So the behavioural change, because remember, we're trying to get into our consumers' head and trying to push out all the other brands that they love. The behavioural change you're looking for depends on the category in question. And I know that might seem a little bit obvious, but one of the things that you can do, and which costs you nothing, is stand in front of the fixture and figure out where are the occasional products, where are the niche products, where are the staple products, where are the core products, and think about whether your product behaves more like core, staple, niche, or occasional. Understanding that will then drive you to think about how you can activate that brand. If it's a core category, price might be an issue. If it's a staple category, you're probably going to find yourself up against some private label competition. If it's a niche category, you might be able to push the price point higher, but you won't have very high frequency. So understanding which sector in the category your product fits in will allow you to know what the rules of engagement are for your product. If it's an occasional product, then really you could probably go to town on packaging and flavors and generate a higher price. So once you know what your behavioral target is, you can start plotting your route. And like I say, you can do this with any of the insight that you have at your disposal or that you've been able to get. It's about the thinking, it's about what is the behavior I'm trying to change. So looking at more needs. So the hair care example I've got here is thinking about identifying new needs, creating products that fit those new needs, or repositioning products that are already out there. Adapt ways to help meet those and help grow the category. So we've seen, particularly in hair care, and I don't know if you've stood in front of a hair care fixture recently, it's quite bewildering, but I suppose there are reasons why you've got such a proliferation of SKUs, is because they are meeting different needs. So grey hair has become quite a trend, and also through the pandemic, with people not having access to the regular hairdresser, have kind of decided to go a bit au naturel. And we've seen some innovation in this area that's kind of celebrating that natural hair colour. Dry shampoo was a really sleepy old category, but has really come into its own in the last few years, with Batiste getting on top of things like festival hair. And actually the Pantene example I've got here is about the fact that you can use your dry shampoo to style your hair. So if we think about more moments, so just moving through the framework there, that's about different formats or different flavors for a broader range of occasions. So the Pantene one here, I quite like this one, it's called Cheat Day. And that's just kind of in between your shampoo and conditioner, just to give your hair a bit of a zhuzh. And then thinking about other parts of that regime. So what L'Oreal will have looked at there is how many products how many other products do people use? So this is thinking about having a pre-wash treatment, mini sizes for when we can eventually travel, and then moving hair care and taking some insight from skincare, having these kind of overnight treatments for your hair. Category growth, so generating a larger repertoire. So really this is about convincing consumers that the full experience of your product is in conjunction with other products. And you can see that in many other categories, but again, using the hair care example, this is about strong hair and having a regime that you have 2 or 3 or 4 products that will help deliver on that promise of strong hair. And making sure that you brand block. Some categories are a bit more functional and you wouldn't be able to do brand blocking, but brand blocking in store obviously creates the illusion of a repertoire and it gives your brand a stronger presence. But sometimes the shelf presence isn't necessarily within our gift and it's something that retailers have decided on. So just some simple stats here. I can't believe I've got this far into a presentation without showing you Kantar stats. But how you can map through what the repertoire looks like is just simply by understanding the subsegments in the category and also which parts are growing. So you can see in this example that both shampoo and dry shampoo are growing, but the fastest growing part of the market is the treatments. And so building that repertoire where you're leveraging the parts of the market that are growing can offset some of the parts of the market that are in decline, so like conditioners and styling aids. So that's just a very simple market map, and you wouldn't necessarily need to buy a whole load of Kantar data to create that. You'd probably be able to get that from data that you can source. But understanding what parts of the market are competing or are complementary to you will allow you to figure out what your repertoire could look like. And then premiumization. So thinking about which parts of the market you can premiumize. And often with startups and challenger brands, you're coming in at a much higher price point. So premiumization and justifying premiumization is probably something that's on the forefront of your minds. So thinking about how can you get shoppers to trade up? Well, you can ask them. You know, you can survey shoppers and find out what their price ceilings are. There's also any number of analysis that any of the data suppliers can help you with about what is the price dynamics within a marketplace. So in this instance, we've got this hair biology, which is all about having a bit more of a sophisticated branding and making it look a bit more like a professional hair care range. Thinking about different types of formats. So the rescue shots here are small, almost like skincare ampoules that you use on your hair. And we're seeing a lot more innovation in the sustainability side of things. So this is about having your main product and then having a refill product. And I would like to say, this is my final slide before we open for questions. True innovation actually does come disproportionately from smaller brands. So this is some work that we did looking at all markets. Looking at private label growth from innovation over the last 3 years. And we've scooped out the top 30 branded manufacturers. And you can see on the chart on the left-hand side that actually other branded, so you guys, are really driving innovation in these categories. What we're seeing on the right-hand side is that when it comes to churn and renovation and simply changing pack format or changing pack copy, you can see private label and the branding manufacturers are very good at doing that. But really, you guys are the engine rooms for our categories. And so I wouldn't lose heart. It's about focusing on the right insight that's going to get you there. So I'll finish on my final slide if you've taken nothing else away from the session this morning, it's about knowing where you're headed and then thinking about how you get there. And hopefully the framework that I've showed you, irrespective of where you're going to source your insight from, might help you hone in on what you feel is within your brand's power to do. So thank you very much. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. That oh, excuse me. That was a really, really interesting presentation there. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, we've got a few questions from the audience, and then I've got some myself. We'll start off with one from the audience, actually from an anonymous attendee who asks, "What would be the first step to take in conducting market research?"
My first step would be know what your brand or your idea already is. Think about in 5 years' time or 1 year's time, what do you want that brand to look like? So that whole start with the end in mind would be, and then I do a thing of what I know and what I need to know, just a very simple chart to myself to say what do I already know, because as brand owners I think sometimes you're a little bit modest. You know a hell of a lot about your brand. If you've started trading and you're doing anything D2C, you know a lot about your consumers. You know where they live, you know perhaps what demographic they are, you know what flavors sell well. So there's already a lot of stuff that you already know, and so I would just purge that, get it all out. What do you know and what don't you know? And be honest, just be honest about both sides of that equation. What is it that you've already got that we can shape into a brand strategy or a brand story? And what is it that you really, really need to know? So that would be first step.
Excellent, thank you. And in terms of buyers, obviously, it'd be fair to say that a lot of market research is more often focused on products. I know, obviously, you mentioned FMCG items. So in terms of the buyer conversation, what are they looking for in terms of the data?
And we speak to buyers actually because the major retailers are also clients of ours. So we've got quite a good line into retail buyers, but we also work with small brands that are on the Future Brand Programme or the Tesco Incubator Programme. So we're quite close to what they're being asked for. And overall, certain retailers will expect their own stuff that plays into what their corporate objectives are. But really, they're looking for incrementality. And what they mean there is any brand coming in will be bringing new shoppers. So whether it's new shoppers from an underperforming category in store, whether it's new shoppers from Sainsbury's into Tesco. So if you can prove how well your brand will deliver on incrementality, that's a tick. Some retailers, Sainsbury's are classic for this, but other retailers will want some level of distinctiveness. And by that, they mean either some level of exclusivity, an exclusive flavor, whatever, but distinctiveness is something that will set their range apart from their competitors. And they're also keen to understand loyalty to your brand. And why they're interested in that is they just don't want brands trading in and out of each other with no category growth. So if you're coming and you can demonstrate some level of loyalty, and again, if you've started your life trading direct to consumer, you will know how many times your loyalists will buy. So you can actually start to play back things like frequency of purchase. So in short, incrementality, distinctiveness, and loyalty.
Excellent, thank you. In your presentation, you mentioned brand, category, and retailer growth. Does the type of market research differ between each of those three strategies? And if so, how?
It does. Well, it can do. It doesn't have to. So when I think I spoke about the other sources that you have and thinking about your own data utility, you wouldn't necessarily need to source 3 separate slugs of data in order to be able to create a growth framework around any of them. It might be that you can simply cut the data that you have. So going back to that, that shopping list of levers, it depends on what lever you want to pull. So if you were looking at understanding more shoppers, you'd probably want to look at demographics, and you could use brand demographics and retailer demographics to create the brand growth and the retailer growth. So it depends on what is the behavior you want to change, and what lever are you going to do? What lever are you going to pull to do that?
Okay, we've had an interesting one coming in from another anonymous attendee who says, I'm currently monitoring my main competitors. What is the importance of analysing their offerings, their targeted customers, etc.?
And that's a brilliant question, and well done for doing that, because often it's quite easy to get myopic on your own brand and service and not really think about what the competitive environment is. I think it's highly important to know what they do well. And again, at the beginning where I said about talk about what you know, or suss out what you know and what you need to know, I think it's really important to understand your competitor in that context as well, and be as objective as possible. So what are they doing well, and what could you do better? What are they doing poorly? Therefore, it's white space for you. So I think it's really important to understand your competitors.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it would be fair to say that particularly in sort of food and drink industries, that a lot of entrepreneurs start up businesses without any experience in that area. And so, they're often quite new to conducting market research, new to the industry. How would you address it if you let's say you're a startup of a food and drink business, you've conducted market research, you're going to talk to a buyer, balancing out the confidence in your research versus a worry that, if you're going to a supermarket, they're the experts, they know what they're talking about. Is there a worry that your data might not be as good as theirs?
Yeah, and this is a conversation I have probably almost daily, and you've got to believe in your proposition, but you've also got to demonstrate that your proposition will help. So the emotion and passion is what's got you through the door. It's what's given you sleepless nights. It's been your passion, and so it's about channeling that passion and matching the buyer's need to know that they can trust you, that you will deliver, and that they are not taking a punt. So you do need to balance it with cold, hard facts, but you probably don't need to have a 25-page PowerPoint presentation in order to be able to do that. The thing I would say is, and when I do speak to buyers, the thing that frustrates them the most is people not knowing their rate of sale or who their target audience is. And they get a little bit grumpy if it's, oh, we're going for ABC1 under 35s, because not every market plays into that space. So if you know your numbers and you've got a strong selling story, just use that to extrapolate. So talk to them about the journey you're on and where you want to end up, because that gives them confidence that you've got a vision and you know where you're going, and they can be a partner to get you there. So I would say have enough data, and I know that sounds like a really political answer, but have enough data to back up why you believe so passionately and energetically about your product.
Yeah, and I guess I think you probably touched on my next question a little bit there, but for a lot of brands now and a lot of consumers actually, that the story of a brand is becoming so much more of a focus point and a reason that they do buy the products. How do you find the balance between the data and the insights and the emotion of the story and the brand when you go into buyers?
And I think it's definitely a tricky one, because I mean, you can see how passionate I am about the brand growth strategy, but you've got to balance that. It's got to be a story that sells, and so the rigor and discipline of thinking about what does your brand offer now and where are you headed, therefore what is the potential, is as important. So I would never say to anyone to shy away from the passion that led them to create this brand, but it does need to be balanced with what is that going to deliver and now and in the future, because selling the longer term dream is as important as understanding where you are now.
Excellent, thank you. And I know we've touched on maybe some different industries. Are there certain product types or industries that are particularly easy, relatively easy to conduct market research for in comparison with others?
And it used to be the case that anyone in FMCG, anyone outside of FMCG was like looking at the FMCG guys, go, oh my God, you guys have just got all the data. But we're finding now with new technology, I mean, even ourselves at Kantar, you can pick up fantastic breadth of research. Something like World Panel Plus, Street Bees have got a fantastic offering, as have Viper. So where technology has really allowed the whole insight industry really to go broad, is probably not at the same level as the FMCG guys, but it's certainly a lot better than it was.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I think we've probably got time for one final one. This one comes from, I hope I pronounced this right, Tinaz. Sorry if I've just butchered that, but who's watching on our LinkedIn live stream. And they've asked, how would it work with being a brand with a disruptive product offering? How would you start exploring your market needs?
Oh, we love a disruptor. And you can see from that chart, the second to last chart that was in my deck, that actually you guys are the growth engines of the category. So I think there's something about that you can feel quite proud about. So disrupting a category is not easy. The word disrupt is the clue there. But again, it's thinking, and this is where I would probably urge Tanaz to look at other categories. So where have other categories been disrupted? And what were the kind of key success factors? One of the great examples, I think, is Fever Tree and tonic water, which was a really stagnant, commoditized market. And they disrupted that market because they thought, well, actually, if all that part of your drink is tonic, then don't you actually deserve to have something that delivers on the taste if you're spending all that money on artisanal gin? So think about where disruptors have done that and whether there's any of those tactics or strategic plays that you might be able to emulate. At Kantar, we've got probably, I'm going to say a filing cabinet, but that shows how old I am, but we've probably got somewhere any number of disruptor case studies. So get in touch if that's something you'd like to know a little bit more about. We love a disruptor because it just shows the power of insight.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. I think that's all we've got time for today. As I just said, thank you so much for your time and expertise today, Sarah. It's been really, really fascinating and a ton of really actionable insights. As you mentioned at the start there, Sarah, if you do want to collect on LinkedIn, I believe Chloe has put that in the chat function for you. And if you do want to catch up on today's masterclass, we'll be sharing the recording in the very near future. The next episode of the How To Academy takes place on the 8th of August, and that's going to be on e-commerce and digitization, and we hope to see you there. But Sarah, any final words before we head off? Any final key takeaway?
Well, it was really lovely to spend this time with you this morning. My I guess my parting thoughts are: don't be frightened of insight. It's friend, not foe, and there's lots of it out there. I think for when you're starting out, it's probably knowing where to navigate, and that's where the team at Kantar can support. And so get in touch if that's something you're keen on.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the session and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.